Davis Mills Week 10 performance against Jacksonville offers a fascinating window into the interplay between coverage structure and quarterback rhythm. Statistically, he completed 27 of 45 passes, 60% for 292 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception, producing a modest plus 2.0% completion percentage over expected CPOE. But the deeper story emerges when separating zone versus man coverage efficiency. Versus zone coverage, Mills was highly effective, completing 24 of 35, throw 69% for 273 yards, and both touchdowns. His CPOE against zone +9. Tom per percent highlights comfort and timing-based concepts, curls, crossers, and seam benders that attack soft spots between defenders. The pass chart shows multiple completions clustered between 0, 10 yards over the middle and right hash, where Jacksonville's linebackers were late closing depth windows. This success stemmed from quick recognition and decisive rhythm throws, particularly on and breaking routes and sit concepts. Versus man coverage, the contrast was stark. Mills went just 3 of 10 for 19 yards and an interception, 23.3% CPOE. Against tighter leverage, his timing faltered, and he struggled to create separation opportunities. The interception, thrown on a deep middle concept, reflects a late trigger against pressman with safety help rotating down. Jacksonville's corners forced tighter windows, and Mills' slower processing under duress negated his earlier rhythm. Spatial distribution and field use. His completions were heavily short to intermediate 0, 10 yards with limited vertical success outside of the 2 touchdown arcs shown on the chart. Both scores came off play action or scramble extensions, where coverage structure broke down and Mills capitalized. Notably, there were few attempts to the far left boundary, suggesting either a schematic bias to the right side or comfort with throwing lanes from pocket alignment. Mobility and play extension. Mills added 2 scrambles for 20 yards and a touchdown, both on broken plays versus man coverage, where defenders' backs were turned. These accounted for some of his highest leverage moments, underscoring that his biggest impacts came when structure dissolved rather than within it. Ovrall Evaluation. This outing reflected a passer who thrives on structure but struggles when forced to improvise within man-heavy environments. Jacksonville's mix of zone on early downs and man pressures late created an uneven rhythm. Mills' positive CPOE overall plus 2.0 masks volatility, high efficiency in zone coverage offset by near total stagnation in man. For future defenses, this profile reinforces a clear tactical takeaway: flood passing lanes with pattern match zone early, then tighten into press man once Mills is forced to hold the ball. In summary, this was a competent yet segmented performance, zone precision masking man discomfort, that paints Mills as a rhythm-dependent quarterback effective only when defenses allow timing throws to stay on schedule. 1. Davis Mills timing and coverage interaction. Davis Mills' 2.59 second average time to throw, second fastest in the league behind Tua Tagovailoa, framed the Texans' offensive identity. Houston leaned heavily on quick pass sequencing, completing 12 of 19, throws 63.2% for 92 yards on those concepts. Mills' rhythm throws were timed to neutralize Jacksonville's edge pressure, especially given the Jaguars' tendency to win early at the line, but lack finishing consistency, high pressure rate, low sack conversion. However, when the play extended beyond 2.5 seconds, efficiency cratered, just 7 of 15, 46.7% for 68 yards, aligning with Jacksonville's split metrics. 73.8% completion allowed on quick passes versus only 54.5% on longer developing ones. Mills' production curve confirmed the Jaguars' design: force elongated reads and win through disguised rotations rather than raw pressure. 2. Nico Collins as a coverage thermometer. Collins' 104-yard, 1 touchdown performance in Week 3 underscored Houston's matchup-based design. Over half his targets, 54.5%, came with at least 3 yards of separation, a testament to his precision on vertical stems and deep crossers versus zone spacing. Against Tyson Campbell, 3 catches, 65 yards, 1 TD. Collins exploited off-man leverage and late hip turns, thriving when Jacksonville's corners failed to reroute him early. Importantly, Collins' ability to beat 5 different defenders shows Houston's isolation flexibility. They moved him across alignments to manipulate matchups, rather than simply forcing him into a static WR1 role. His success came almost exclusively against zone or loose press shells, where timing-based throws synced perfectly with Mills' quick-release profile. 3. Derrick Stingley Jr. in coverage mirror. On the defensive side, Stingley's profile mirrors the inverse of Collins' elite in zone, vulnerable in man. He's allowed 211 yards in man coverage, 5 the most among outside corners, but only 103 yards in zone 2 and lowest, with a 31.6% ball hawk rate in zone concepts. The Texans' defensive architecture likely shadowed Jacksonville's heavy man rotation tendencies and adjusted accordingly. In this matchup context, Stingley's data also provides a lens into what Jacksonville faced. His ability to close windows in zone may have forced Mills to attack outside leverage elsewhere, leading to the split production seen in the pass chart strong to right/middle, weak outside left. 4. Tactical interplay, quick game versus coverage shells. When Houston was on offense, Mills and Collins thrived when Jacksonville sat in off-zone shells, leveraging quick rhythm and clean reads. Once Jacksonville rotated to man, both efficiency and separation collapsed. When Houston was on defense, Stingley's inverse pattern, elite in zone, inconsistent in man, created a schematic mirror. Both units depended on coverage integrity and timing disruption more than pressure volume. 5. Strategic implication. The data triangulates around a shared theme. Timing defines control. For Mills and Collins, quick-release sequencing masked limitations in extended play creation. For Jacksonville, disruption depended less on pressure and more on when coverage shells forced hesitation. The result was a game shaped by milliseconds. Whichever side dictated rhythm controlled the outcome. Summary insight: Mills' rapid processing and Collins' route precision formed an efficient quick game tandem that exploited Jacksonville's soft zones. But the offense remained brittle once forced into man coverage or deeper developing reads. Conversely, Houston's zone defense, anchored by Stingley's zone dominance, reflected the same principle: coverage discipline over pressure, making both teams' success contingent on sustaining structure rather than creating off-script chaos. 1. Production and usage profile. Collins caught 7 of 15 targets for 136 yards, 19.4 yards per reception, his highest yardage total of the season. Despite no touchdowns, his 13.9 air yards per target and 111 yards on throws traveling 10-plus air yards reveal a clear offensive design shift. Houston featured him as the primary vertical manipulator in a pass game otherwise built on short timing rhythm. Deep volume 9 targets of 10-plus air yards reflects trust in his isolation skill set and catch radius usage versus man-match looks. 25 yards after the catch, a modest figure relative to total yardage, indicates most production came through vertical separation, not schemed YAK. This was less a yards after catch performance and more a downfield displacement effort, where Collins forced the Jaguars' safeties to widen and retreat, opening space for underneath outlets. 2. Route distribution and tactical layers. The route chart reveals 3 distinct zones of emphasis: deep right boundary corner, go, and sail concepts. Several completions beyond plus 20 yards came from Mills' timing throws off play action. Jacksonville's deep third defenders were slow to rotate, particularly when showing single high looks that disguised into cover 3 buzz or cover 6. Collins consistently found leverage on the outside shoulder of off-coverage corners. Intermediate middle crossers dig deep in series? Houston used Collins to stress the second level, running layered crossers behind play action. These 15 to 25-yard routes exploited Jacksonville's pattern match linebackers who drifted downhill too quickly versus run fakes. Underneath left side out hitch combinations, these served as coverage keys, designed not for volume but to manipulate zone depth. They forced cornerbacks to honor shallow stems, setting up later deep shots down the same boundary. Overall, Collins' route map shows expansive horizontal distribution, with vertical punctures the hallmarks of a receiver trusted to occupy multiple coverage layers. 3. Context versus Jaguars coverage. Against a defense that alternates between zone disguise on early downs and man pressure on third, Collins' success was schematic and individual. He won repeatedly against off-zone, leveraging speed and body control to attack voids at plus 15 to plus 25 yards. When Jacksonville rotated to press man, Mills' timing deteriorated as seen in his 3 for 10-man coverage stat line, leading to several incompletions visible on boundary fades. The lack of a touchdown, despite heavy yardage, speaks to Jacksonville's red zone adjustment, tighter coverage, compressing space, and forcing Mills into lower-risk checkdowns. 4. Analytical takeaway. A Collins' 136-yard outing was a prototype vertical displacement game, more valuable strategically than the box score implies. His ability to consistently gain depth and command multiple defenders dictated coverage rotation throughout the second half. That impact extended beyond receptions, setting up Houston's underneath rhythm, throws, and spacing structure. In practical terms, explosive target rate, 60% of targets traveled 10-plus air yards. Efficiency trade-off, only 46.7% catch rate, but elite yardage per successful attempt. Coverage stress index forced Jacksonville's safeties to widen, softening intermediate seams and altering blitz frequency. Summary. Nico Collins' Week 10 performance reflected top-tier field stretching influence rather than pure efficiency. His vertical alignment versatility, catch radius confidence, and spatial control against zone forced Jacksonville to compromise its middle field integrity. In short, Collins didn't just beat coverage, he reshaped it, dictating the defensive geometry that Houston's offense built around. 1. Statistical efficiency and volume. Hunter rushed the passer 28 times, generating 8 total pressures and 3.5 sacks, an elite 28.6% pressure rate, his first game above 25% all year. For perspective, league average edge pressure rates hover around 13%, meaning Hunter doubled the baseline while facing 9 chip block attempts, his second highest total of the season. His 0.88-second get-off further underlines the explosiveness. That's roughly 0.15 seconds faster than the league edge, average approximately 1.03 seconds. It indicates a combination of refined stance timing, anticipatory snap awareness, and excellent weight transfer through the first 2 steps. 2. Alignment and rush path tendencies. The chart shows Hunter attacking almost exclusively from the left edge defensive right of the offense, bending through inside shoulder and outside rip lanes interchangeably. Primary pressure arc blue/green cluster. Hunter used a tight dip and rip angle to reduce surface area against right tackles, flattening toward Trevor Lawrence's launch point at approximately 5 yards of depth. Secondary counterpath. Several pressures stemmed from spin or inside swim counters when Jacksonville's tackle overset. This is reflected in the short inside paths crossing the LOS midpoint. Contain integrity. Despite his aggressive angles, there's minimal evidence of lost containment, showing disciplined arc management and complementary rush fits with the interior. 3. Context versus Jacksonville's protection scheme. Trevor Lawrence faced a Jaguars offensive line using heavy chip support, 9 total from tight ends and running backs, but the distribution shows that those efforts failed to neutralize Hunter's explosiveness. Jacksonville often slid protection away from Hunter to account for simulated pressures on the opposite edge, isolating him in one-on-one matchups. On downs where they did chip, Hunter often reset leverage mid-rep and converted speed to power, walking the tackle back into the pocket. Several of his sacks occurred on longer developing play action or intermediate concept plays, where Lawrence's average time to throw extended beyond 2.8 seconds, exposing the protection's endurance weakness. 4. Technical and physical highlights. Get off and leverage. The sub 0.9, 0 get off reflects near perfect stance timing. He was reading the cadence and firing off with low pad level. Counter sequence efficiency. His success came not from one move, but from sequencing, speed rush threat early, then spin or club rip later. Finish rate. 3.5 sacks from 8 pressures is a 43.7% conversion rate, roughly triple the league norm app 15%. This indicates precision in closing angles once pressure was achieved. 5. Strategic implications. Hunter's production forced Jacksonville into compressed route timing and shorter drop depths in the second half, effectively neutralizing their intermediate route game. His pressure footprint narrowed Trevor Lawrence's field vision and directly contributed to stalled drives. For Houston's defensive design, this validated the four-man front philosophy, relying on elite edge efficiency rather than blitz volume while enabling heavier zone rotations behind the rush. Summary: Danielle Hunter's Week 10 outing was a clinic in edge rush efficiency and adaptability. Elite burst 0.88 get-off, sustained pressure 28.6% rate, and remarkable sack conversion 3.5 sacks on 28 rushes. He repeatedly won through timing, leverage, and motor against heavy chip assistance, reshaping Jacksonville's protection plan and dictating their offensive rhythm. In essence, it was a masterclass in how a veteran edge manipulates protection rules through anticipation and technical precision rather than raw blitz volume. Offensive overview: low explosive, high structure unit. Run game: Nick Chubb's efficiency decline and run design issues. Chubb's missed tackle rate 16.5% ranks among the lowest in the league, third worst for backs with 50-plus carries. He has failed to surpass 20% missed tackle forced rate for the second straight season, a clear sign that his contact balance and elusiveness have regressed, possibly due to reduced lower body explosiveness post-injury. Houston's ground game averages just 3.7 yards per carry 6, the fewest with a league low 28.9% rushing success rate. Even worse, the Texans generate only 2.7 yards after contact per carry, indicating that they are not sustaining movement at the point of attack. The offense has recorded an explosive run rate of just 6.7%, second lowest in the NFL, a byproduct of predictable gap schemes and limited second-level breakaway speed. Interpretation: Houston's run game has become a control element rather than a weapon. It provides clock management and situational stability, but fails to generate chunk plays or force defenses out of too high shells. This inefficiency places heavier pressure on the quick passing game to sustain drives. Passing structure: Schultz as a Y-ax valve, Collins as the vertical counter. Dalton Schultz: 75% of targets come within 9 air yards, third highest among tight ends, and 51.4% of his yards come after the catch, showing his role as a rhythm safety valve in Mills' quick passing ecosystem. Schultz leads all tight ends in receptions on short throws, 31 of 36, cementing him as Houston's primary timing route anchor. Nico Collins functions as the deep complement to Schultz's short game volume. As noted earlier, he averaged 13.9 air yards per target in Week 10 with 111 deep yards versus Jacksonville, Houston's most reliable source of explosive potential. Jalen Knoll briefly filled a secondary stretch role during injuries to Collins and Kirk, generating 49 yards over expected across Week 7, 8. But his snap rate collapsed to 15% in Week 9, showing how depth receivers have limited staying power once starters return. Interpretation: the Texans' passing tree is bifurcated by depth and role. Schultz operates as a horizontal chain mover underneath, while Collins provides vertical gravity. The missing middle layer threats, intermediate crossers, slot seams prevent defensive displacement, making Houston overly dependent on matchup wins rather than structural stress. Defensive overview: fast, disruptive front, soft tackling layer. Pressure generation: Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. The Texans rank 16th in the NFL in pressure rate 34.5%, but they reach pressure faster than anyone else. 2.52 seconds average time to pressure, the fastest in the league. Will Anderson Jr. leads this charge. 42 total pressures, for the most in the league, 29 from the left edge, but an elite 29.5% pressure rate from the right side, highest among linemen, with 25-plus rushes from that alignment. Responsible for 21 of the team's 48 quick pressures under 2.5 seconds, ranking second in the NFL. Danielle Hunter complements this with volatility and finish power, as seen in Week 10's 3.5 sack outburst 28.6% pressure rate. Together, they create a dual velocity front, Hunter collapsing depth, Anderson compressing time. Interpretation. Houston's pass rush is among the league's most kinetically efficient. They don't blitz often, but they win early and dictate pocket timing. It's a modern speed rush defense modeled after the 2019 49ers archetype. Four-man fronts, accelerated disruption, zone match coverage behind it. The Houston Texans' 2025 philosophical identity reflects a high-velocity, timing-based blueprint, aggressive on defense and conservative on offense, but one marked by structural imbalances. Defensively, the pass rush is the team's defining strength, driven by Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter, who form an elite quick pressure tandem that gives Houston the fastest average time to pressure in the National Football League. However, their biggest weakness lies in finishing consistency and in the synchronization between pressure and coverage, which occasionally prevents pressures from translating into drive-ending plays. In coverage, the defense thrives on speed and rally discipline, embodying a bend but limit philosophy that restricts explosive plays, but suffers from a high missed tackle rate and periodic leverage breakdowns in space. Offensively, the run game is anchored by a physical offensive line and the stability of Nick Chubb, yet it lacks explosiveness and yards after contact, functioning more as a tool for field position control than as a dynamic threat. The passing attack, meanwhile, depends heavily on quick game rhythm and tight end Dalton Schultz's reliability as a short area outlet, but it lacks intermediate route stress and leans too heavily on wide receiver Nico Collins for vertical balance. The result is a compact and linear offensive structure that sustains drives but rarely stretches defenses horizontally or vertically. Overall, Houston's blueprint embodies speed and precision on defense paired with conservative control on offense, a system that can suffocate opponents in structure but struggles to create asymmetry or explosive separation in shootout environments. Overall tactical picture. Houston's 2025 Texans are essentially a mirror image team. Defensively, they accelerate plays and limit yards after the catch/run. Offensively, they slow the tempo, control the clock, and struggle to explode. Their win profile depends on staying in low-variance game scripts, where early down efficiency from Schultz/C, BB sustains drives, and the defense can attack known pass downs with Hunter Anderson speed. But if opponents force shootouts or expose their tackling inefficiency in space, Houston's current structure lacks the vertical and explosive counterpunch to respond. Bottom line, the Texans embody a compressed efficiency model, lightning fast pressure, deliberate offensive tempo, minimal explosive variance. It's a roster that can choke rhythm from average opponents but struggles to create asymmetry, meaning they can slow down great teams but not separate from them. The Jacksonville Jaguars' Week 10 defensive performance revealed a clear divide between early down disruption and inconsistent deep coverage integrity. They allowed 282 passing yards, averaging 6 yards per pass, with a minus 0.05 expected points added EPR pass, while surrendering 130 rushing yards at 5.9 yards per carry and generating a plus 0.2 for EPA per rush forced. Despite holding the opponent to modest overall efficiency, the Jaguars' pressure-to-impact ratio exposed inefficiency in finishing plays. A 44.9% quarterback pressure rate produced only 2 sacks, or 4.1% of dropbacks, underscoring their difficulty in converting pressure into drive-ending results. The pass rush was driven largely by edge defenders Josh Hines-Allen and Trammell Walker. Hines-Allen led the group with 5 quarterback pressures and a 12.8% pressure rate across approximately 40 rushes, showing average explosiveness with a 0.9-second get-off. Arik Armstead contributed the only defensive line sack, producing a 19.4% pressure rate and 3 quarterback hits, marking him as the most efficient finisher on the line. Interior defenders Davon Hamilton, Dawoon Smoot, and Colin Saunders combined for negligible disruption, averaging 0 pressures per 10 rushes and leaving too much pressure responsibility on the edge. The Jaguars blitzed on roughly 36% of dropbacks, producing one of their better pressure sequences when safety Antonio Johnson registered a sack on his lone rush. However, the blitz-to-sack conversion rate of just 2.7% showed that most pressures failed to end plays. Even without blitzing, the front produced 44 total pressures, but opposing quarterbacks still averaged 2.7 seconds to throw, indicating hurried pockets that still left passing windows open. Coverage results were inconsistent across depths. On quick throws under 2.5 seconds, the opposing offense completed 9 of 12 passes, generating plus 1.2 coverage EPA by exploiting pre-pressure space. On intermediate throws of 10, 19 air yards, multiple chunk plays were allowed, particularly against Greg Newsome II, who surrendered 62 yards and an 85.7% catch rate, and linebacker Devin Lloyd, who allowed 48 yards, combining for over 7 points of positive coverage EPA against them. Deep targets of 20-plus air yards were equally problematic, with Antonio Johnson, Monteric Brown, and Jerrion Jones each allowing completions. Jones was beaten for a 54-yard gain and a 118.8 passer rating when targeted, while Brown maintained the best tightness at 1.3 yards of separation and 0 yards after catch per reception. Johnson's 2.3-yard average cushion resulted in 27 yards and plus 0.4 coverage EPA allowed. In non-blitz coverages, Brown held opposing quarterbacks to an 88.7 passer rating and negative 15.5 completion percentage over expected CPOE, whereas Newsome's volatility showed a plus 29.4 CPO and plus 5.2 coverage EPA. Safety Andrew Wingard provided stability, posting a minus 40.1 completion percentage over expected, best among Jaguars' defensive backs, and allowing just 6 total yards. Run defense discipline varied by box alignment. In neutral 7-man boxes, Jacksonville allowed 55 rushing yards on 25 carry 6.1 yards per carry with plus 0.16 EPA per rush. In light boxes with fewer than 7 defenders, they gave up 69 yards on 10 carries 6.9 yards per carry with plus 0.32 EPA per rush, exposing consistent issues in edge containment. Stacked boxes of 8 or more defenders limited opponents to 6 yards per carry on 3 attempts, but produced no stuffs, a 0% stuff rate. Outside runs were particularly vulnerable, allowing 78 yards and plus 0.42 EPA, while inside runs were more controlled at 5.8 yards per carry with a 22.2% stuff rate. Linebackers Foye Oluokun and Devin Lloyd combined for 15 tackles and 6 defensive stops in the box, providing stability in traffic but wearing down late. Individual player efficiency highlighted both strengths and vulnerabilities. Foye Oluokun led the team with 19 run defense snaps, recording 8 tackles and 4 stops, though he surrendered a 118.8 passer rating in coverage and plus 2.2 coverage EPA, showing weakness when isolated against tight ends and running backs. Devin Lloyd added 3 quarterback pressures and 2 stops, but allowed a 100% completion rate on 4 targets. Antonio Johnson played balanced snaps in both the slot and deep safety roles, tallying 1 sack and 1 reception allowed on 3 targets for 27 yards, with a minus 11.5 completion percentage over expected, a sign of disciplined individual coverage. Monteric Brown was the most targeted defender, facing 9 passes and allowing 4 receptions while keeping opposing quarterbacks under a 90 rating and adding a key interception. Greg Newsome II delivered a volatile feast or famine, surrendering 62 yards, yet forcing tight coverage on intermediate crossers, finishing with plus 29.4 completion percentage over expected. Several tactical themes defined Jacksonville's defensive outcome. First, the Jaguars generated pressure but failed to capitalize, as a 45% pressure rate produced only 2 sacks, a clear inefficiency in finishing plays. Second, the coverage unit was volatile, with Brown and Wingard containing quick routes while Newsome and Jones gave up deeper completions. The third, the defense was vulnerable to spread formations and light boxes, allowing 6.9 yards per carry in those looks due to lapses in edge discipline and safety support. Finally, linebacker fatigue became apparent as the game progressed, with Oluokun and Lloyd playing nearly every snap 56 and 48, respectively, correlating with rising yards after contact and shallower tackle depth in later drives. In summary, Jacksonville's Week 10 defensive effort was defined by near misses and unconverted pressure. The scheme successfully generated disruption, but failed to sustain complementary coverage or reinforce backside run fits. The front four frequently won early in the down, yet could not translate pressure into sacks, while coverage alternated between physical press success and deep ball breakdowns. Without timely plays from Monteric Brown and Antonio Johnson, the outing could have unraveled into a high explosive yardage game. Statistically, the split between negative EPA per pass and positive EPA per rush underscored a defense capable of dictating specific downs, but unable to maintain leverage throughout full drives. To evolve, the Jaguars must better synchronize their blitz execution and strengthen edge containment integrity, particularly against lighter box alignments and spread-based run concepts. Overall defensive profile. The Jaguars faced a balanced defensive attack: 69 total plays, 47 passes, 22 runs. While their pass defense allowed 282 passing yards and 6.0 yards per pass with an EPA per pass of 0.05. The unit generated only 2 sacks, 4.1% sack rate, and a quarterback pressure rate of 44.9%, indicating that the Jaguars' Week 10 defensive performance showcased a clear structural divide between solid early down disruption and lapses in deep coverage integrity. They allowed 282 passing yards, 6.0 yards per pass with a 0.05 expected points added per pass, while giving up 130 rushing yards, 5.9 yards per carry, but generating a plus 0.24 EPA per rush offensively forced. Despite holding the opponent to a modest overall efficiency rate, Jacksonville's pressure-to-impact ratio was inconsistent, 44.9% quarterback pressure rate, but only 2 sacks, 4.1%, reflecting issues converting pressure into negative plays. The edge group, led by Josh Hines-Allen 5 quarterback pressures and Trammell and Walker 1, accounted for most of the pass rush volume. Hines-Allen produced a 12.8% quarterback pressure rate on 41 rushes, with consistent get-off around 0.9 seconds, aligning with league average explosiveness. Arik Armstead added the lone sack among linemen, posting a 19.4% pressure rate and 3 quarterback hits, marking him as the most efficient finisher. However, Jacksonville's interior defenders, Davon Hamilton, Dawuane Smoot, and Colin Saunders, combined for limited penetration average 0 pressures per 10 rushes, leaving too much one-on-one reliance on edge wins. Under blitz conditions, the Jaguars sent 5 or more rushers on roughly 36% of dropbacks, yielding one of their better collective pressure looks. Antonio Johnson logged a rare defensive back sack 100% conversion on his single rush. Yet, the overall blitz to sack yield was only 2.7%, meaning pressures rarely closed plays. Without blitzing, the front still produced 44 pressures, but quarterback time to throw averaged 2.7 seconds, showing that while they hurried the passer, the timing window remained open. Coverage results were mixed across depths. Quick throws 2.5 seconds, Houston completed 9 of 12 with +1. 2 coverage EPA, exploiting space before pressure arrived. Intermediate throws 10, 19 air yards. Jaguars defenders yielded multiple chunk gains, notably Greg Newsome the 62 yards, 85.7% catch rate, +5. 2 coverage EPA and Devin Lloyd 48 yards, +2. 7 coverage EPA. Deep targets 20+ air yards. 3 key defenders, Antonio Johnson, Monteric Brown, and Jarrian Jones, each allowed completions, with Jones surrendering a 54-yard play and a 118.8 passer rating when targeted. Only Brown maintained tight, spacing 1.3 yards average separation, 0 yards after catch per reception, while Johnson's 2.3-yard cushion enabled 27 yards and +0. 4 coverage EPA allowed. In no blitz coverage scenarios, Monteric Brown stood out, holding opposing quarterbacks to an 88.7 rating with 15.5 completion percentage over expected, while Newsome's variance +29.4 CPOE, +5. 2 coverage EPA reflected the defense's volatility between boundary and slot. Andrew Wingard quietly stabilized the secondary, producing a 40.1 completion percentage over expected, best among Jaguars defensive backs, with just 6 yards allowed. Against the run, Jacksonville's discipline fluctuated by box alignment. Neutral box 7 defenders allowed 55 rushing yards on 25 attempts, 6.1 yards per carry, and +0. 16 EPA per rush. Light box 7 gave up 69 rushing yards on 10 carries, 6.9 YPC with +0. 32 EPA per rush, indicating persistent issues defending lighter looks, especially off tackle. Stacked box 8+. Limited opponents to only 6 yards per carry on 3 runs, but did not register a single stuff 0% stuff rate. By direction, outside runs were the weakness, 78 rushing yards, 6.0 per carry, +0. 42 EPA with 3 gains of 10+ yards. Conversely, inside tackles saw better control, 5.8 YPC, 22.2% stuff rate, reflecting better fits from linebackers, Foye Oluokun and Devin Lloyd, who combined for 15 total tackles and 6 defensive stops in the box. Player efficiency highlights. Foye Oluokun, team high 19 run defense snaps, 8 tackles, 4 stops. However, a 118.8 passer rating allowed in coverage and +2. Kun. Coverage EPA suggests susceptibility when isolated against tight ends and backs. Devin Lloyd generated 3 quarterback pressures and 2 stops, but allowed a 100% completion rate on 4 targets. Antonio Johnson, balanced usage slot and deep, 1 sack, 3 targets, 1 reception for 27 yards, 11.5% completion over expected, showing positive individual discipline. Monteric Brown, the most targeted defender, 9 targets, 4 receptions, yet held opposing quarterbacks under 90 rating and contributed a key interception. Greg Newsome II, feast or famine, gave up 62 yards, but also forced tight coverage on intermediate crossers, finishing with +29.4 completion percentage over expected. Tactical takeaways. 1. Pressure without payoff, 45% pressure rate, but only 2 sacks signals inefficiency in finishing plays. Jacksonville's front won early but lacked pursuit cohesion. 2. Coverage volatility. Corners alternated between shutdown and exploitable. Brown and Wingard contained quick routes, while Newsome and Jones were burned on longer developing patterns. 3. Run game vulnerability to spread sets. Allowing 6.9 yards per carry in light boxes exposes edge-contained discipline and safety-fill timing. 4. Linebacker fatigue effect. High snap loads for Oluokun 56 snaps, 100% participation, and Lloyd 48 snaps, 95.7% correlated with rising yards after contact and declining tackle depth late in drives. Summary narrative. Jacksonville's Week 10 defensive showing was a story of near misses and unconverted pressure. The scheme succeeded in generating consistent disruption, but faltered in complementary coverage and backside run containment. The Jaguars' front 4 produced movement, but rarely closed with finishing pressure, while coverage units alternated between physical press success and deep ball lapses. If not for Brown and Johnson's timely plays, this game could have turned into a high explosive yardage collapse. The statistical balance, negative EPA per pass, but positive EPA per rush, highlights a defense capable of dictating downs but not sustaining leverage over time. The next step will be improving blitz synchronization and sealing edge integrity against lighter fronts. In Week 10, Jacksonville's passing game reflected a highly segmented but efficient system built around situational precision rather than volume. Jacoby Myers stood out as the Jaguars' most consistent producer across all route and alignment contexts, posting a +4.4 receiving expected points added EPA with +41.1% catch rate over expected CROE and +4 yards after catch over expected YOE. Consistently winning in both press coverage, +4.1 rec EPA and tight window, +6.1% CROE settings. His timing and separation metrics, 6.9 average separation on slot routes, and 10.2 yards per target outside the numbers made him the team's most complete route winner. His production was particularly evident on outbreaking and play action concepts, where he generated the highest per target efficiency, suggesting he thrives off play sequencing and leverage manipulation. Tight end Johnny Munt complemented that profile with elite situational value. Though only targeted sparingly, Munt created disproportionate impact in condensed alignments, most notably versus blitz +3, 3 rec EPA, and off coverage plus 2.4 rec EPA. He led all Jaguars receivers in per target efficiency on shortened down seam routes, averaging 21 yards per route with a +23, 3% CROE, and 22 yards after catch, a rare combination of catch reliability and post-catch conversion from a tight end. His versatility across tight alignment and screen route categories underscored his role as the offense's release valve under pressure and mismatch creator against zone shells. Running backs Travis Etienne and Bashul Tutin provided secondary production, mainly from backfield and short yardage routes. Etienne logged +0.6 rec EPA on screen designs with a +0.20 EPA per target, showcasing his signature efficiency after contact 29 Y-axis and positive YACO-E margins +3. His value, however, dropped sharply on vertical and backfield alignments, 0.4 EPA, reinforcing his fit as a rhythm receiver rather than a spacing threat. Tutin's data showed intermittent efficiency, +1.3 rec EPA from backfield alignment and +12.9% CROE, but negative outcomes on outbreaking and in breaking routes, 0.9 to 1.9 rec EPA, reflecting developmental inconsistency in route precision and coverage reads. Among the depth wideouts, Austin Trammell quietly produced one of the more efficient outings per opportunity. He posted +1.6 rec EPA on vertical routes and +19. 2% CROE between the hashes, thriving as an interior field stretcher with solid intermediate timing, 15.3 average air yards per target, 3.1 average separation. Parker Washington, by contrast, demonstrated mixed results. While his screen and vertical targets combined for strong yard per route metrics early in the game, 6.5 yards/route, +71. 7% CROE in verticals, he was less efficient in off coverage and outbreaking patterns, 0.8 to 1.6 rec EPA, indicating that he benefited most from schemed leverage rather than pure route winning separation. Collectively, the data paints a balanced but niche-driven unit. Myers as the true all-phase separator and leverage manipulator, Munt as the situational tight space weapon, Etienne as the timing and Y-AC outlet, Trammell as the efficient vertical connector, and Washington as the schemed auxiliary piece. Against both pressure and off coverage, Jacksonville generated positive team-level EPA, largely from short game precision and condensed alignment spacing. The passing design heavily on tight and slot alignments, leveraging motion and play action to isolate middle field voids. While lacking explosive diversity, this structure maximized predictability control, converting efficiency from rhythm and spacing rather than raw depth or volume. The Jacksonville Jaguars' week 10 rushing performance against the Houston Texans reflected a fragmented and inefficient ground game that functioned only in isolated contexts. Overall, the Jaguars ran 27 designed rushing plays for 94 total yards, averaging 3.5 yards per carry, but the deeper analytics told a far less flattering story. Their overall expected points added per rush EPA/rush was -0.26, with a total rush EPA of -7.0 and a success rate of just 33.3%. Nearly 1 out of every 5 attempts was stuffed at or behind the line of scrimmage, and the team finished with 9 fewer rushing yards over expected REOE than anticipated. In short, Jacksonville's rushing offense lacked rhythm, sequencing, and adaptability to Houston's changing defensive fronts. The team's 49% run rate suggested an effort to maintain balance, but efficiency collapsed whenever the Texans dictated box structure through alignment and post-snap rotation. Against light defensive boxes with fewer than 7 defenders, Jacksonville averaged 37 rushing yards per game but still posted a negative 0.51 EPA per rush and a low 25% success rate, even with advantageous spacing, poor blocking angles, and delayed reads by the running backs negated potential gains. The Jaguars were most stable against neutral boxes with 7 defenders, producing positive results, a plus 0.21 EPA per rush, plus 6 rushing yards over expected, and a 50% success rate, largely thanks to better line leverage and timing. However, once Houston began stacking the box with 8 or more defenders, the Jaguars' ground game completely collapsed. Their EPA dropped to negative 4.7, rushing yards over expected fell to negative 12, and success rate plummeted to just 27%. Houston effectively forced Jacksonville into inefficient, telegraphed interior runs, using disguised safety rotations and simulated pressures to overload gaps without committing extra blitzers. Directional data revealed that every positive rushing moment came from outside the tackles. Jacksonville averaged 76 yards per game on outside, runs with a positive 0.0 EPA per rush, a 42.9% success rate, and plus 13 rushing yards over expected, including 2 explosive runs of 10 yards or more. Inside runs, by contrast, were disastrous. The team averaged only 18 yards per game with negative 0.58 EPA per rush and a 23% success rate, while 38.5% of those plays were stopped behind the line. This imbalance underscored a structural issue. The Jaguars' interior offensive line could not generate pad leverage or sustain reach blocks against Houston's disciplined front, forcing running back Travis Etienne into horizontal escape paths that played into linebacker pursuit angles. Individually, Etienne led the team with 16 carries for 58 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3.6 yards per carry, but he produced negative 0.3 rushing yards over expected per attempt and negative 3.3 total rush EPA. His only efficiency came on runs to the perimeter, where spacing and misdirection gave him clean reads. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence was the team's most efficient rusher on a per-play basis, gaining 35 yards on 5 attempts with 7.0 yards per carry plus 1 rushing yards over expected per attempt, and negative 0.6 total rush EPA. Lawrence's scrambles salvaged several broken plays and accounted for the team's only positive rushing value when trailing. Rookie Bashul Tutin added 4 carries for 5 yards with a 25% success rate, while wide receiver Parker Washington's 2 jet sweep attempts lost 4 yards, emphasizing how perimeter gadget plays failed to manipulate Houston's edge defenders. Etienne's production was therefore misleading. More than 1/3 of his yards came after contact, and nearly all of them occurred outside the tackles. Every inside zone or duo concept he attempted generated negative results, showing that Houston's interior defensive linemen and linebackers completely controlled the point of attack. Situationally, the Jaguars found brief success in short yardage and red zone moments. In goal-to-go situations, they produced plus 1 point EPA per rush and a perfect success rate, with Etienne and Washington both contributing. However, when leading or operating under center, Jacksonville's EPA fell sharply to negative 1.3 as conservative first down rushing calls became predictable. Even in neutral early down situations, the Jaguars failed to establish rhythm, often facing second and third and long scenarios that invited heavier fronts. The only consistent positive came from quarterback scrambles in trailing situations, which generated plus 0.30 EPA per attempt and a 100% success rate, reflecting Lawrence's improvisism rather than its structural design. Conceptually, Stan's Collapsism. Conceptually, Houston's defense dictated every layer of Jacksonville's rushing rhythm. The Texans mixed simulated pressures, slants, and disciplined run fits to manipulate Jacksonville's blocking surfaces. Without a credible counter package, such as trap, counter, or designed quarterback keep, the Jaguars' interior run concepts became predictable. The offense relied heavily on horizontal stretch and misdirection, but once the Texans compressed space, and eliminated cutback lanes, Jacksonville had no schematic answer. Outside zone and toss plays occasionally found daylight, but the inability to pair those with inside power or split zone adjustments left the offense one-dimensional. The result was a ground game that produced isolated flashes without sustained value, schematic isolation that mirrored the same issues seen in their passing offense. Ultimately, the Jaguars' rushing performance in Week 10 exemplified structural disconnection and defensive manipulation. They showed efficiency only in open space, low box contexts, but crumbled under physical fronts. Travis Etienne's plus 13 rushing yards, overexpected outside the tackles, could not offset his 21 inside, and Trevor Lawrence's scrambles masked a broader absence of rhythm. The Jaguars were unable to sequence their runs effectively, balance their formations, or force Houston to defend multiple dimensions. The Texans not only outplayed them physically, but also dismantled their conceptual foundation, turning Jacksonville's normally fluid rushing system into a fragmented, predictable, and easily contained operation. In Week 10, the matchup between the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars revealed a detailed picture of each team's situational adaptability across multiple offensive splits, including motion usage, game state conditions tied, leading or trailing, red zone and goal to go efficiency, and formation tendencies such as under center and shotgun alignments. The metrics illuminate not only overall efficiency, but also how each team's identity shifted based on field position and game script. For the Houston Texans offense against the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, the unit ran 45 total plays, passing on 62.2% of them, and averaged 36 points per game with a plus 0.16. Expected points added per play EPA per play, and a plus 0.123 expected points added per rush EPA per rush. This balance between the run and pass reflected a multi-dimensional attack that maintained efficiency in both phases. When operating under center, the Texans ran 25 plays, passing 44% of the time, with 4.8 yards per play YPP, a modest plus 0.02 EPA per play, and a 54.5% quarterback pressure QBP rate. These plays often involved play-action designs that kept Jacksonville's defense honest and off balance. In the red zone, Houston excelled. 17 plays, 70.6% pass, produced 67 yards, 3.9 yards per play, a plus 0, 40 EPA per play, and an exceptional plus 0, 85 EPA per rush, culminating in 4 touchdowns. This high finish rate demonstrated their dominance in compressed field situations, where interior push and play sequencing consistently led to conversions. In goal-to-go scenarios, Houston continued that success, running 8 plays with a 37.5% pass rate for 20 yards, 2.5 yards per play, a plus 0, 11 EPA per play, and a plus 0, 85 EPA per rush. Even under heavy defensive pressure, 15 pressures on 51.7% of dropbacks, the Texans maintained rhythm and composure, averaging a time to throw TT of 2.8 seconds. Overall, their efficiency peaked in short field situations, where both run and pass-based plays produced positive EPA values, proving that Jacksonville's defense could not dictate the structural terms of play. Houston's run blocking efficiency, averaging roughly 6.1 yards per rushing attempt, especially exploited the Jaguars' lighter defensive fronts. On the opposite side, Jacksonville's offensive splits in Week 10 exposed a significant drop in efficiency depending on game context. When leading, the Jaguars passed on 52.2% of plays, but managed only 0.07 EPA per play, with 2.8 yards per rush and 5.5 yards per pass, as conservative sequencing restricted explosive plays. When trailing, the team passed 53.1% of the time, yet recorded an even worse 0.22 EPA per play, 3.6 yards per rush, and 4.6 yards per pass, reflecting poor comeback structure and limited pass protection flexibility. In neutral, tied situations, the Jaguars' offense collapsed entirely. Just 33.3% pass rate, 0.78 EPA per play, 2.8 yards per rush, and 0 passing yardage, with a 100% quarterback pressure rate, indicating complete breakdowns in protection and rhythm. Their goal-to-go efficiency was a small sample exception. 5 plays at 40% pass rate delivered plus 0.36 EPA per play and successful short yardage execution through specific situational seasonally. Jacksonville's under-center offense has been its most balanced identity, passing on 29.3% of plays, 157 total runs for plus 0. 0.5 EPA per play, 4.7 yards per rush, and 5.7 yards per pass, with a 32.4% pressure rate. This contrasts sharply with their shotgun tendencies, where they pass on 78% of 341 plays, but efficiency dips to 0.11 EPA per play, 4.5 yards per rush, and 5.3 yards per pass, exposing the limitations of their spread-based protection schemes. From a macro perspective, the Jaguars' 2025 offensive identity has been balanced but low in explosiveness. Across the season, they have run 590 total plays, 58% pass and 42% run, averaging 324.9 yards per game, 204.6 passing, and 120.3 rushing. Their overall EPA per play stands at 0.06 with 0.12 EPA per pass and plus 0. 0.3 EPA per rush, while their average time to throw is 2.80 seconds, and their quarterback pressure rate is 31.1%, slightly below the league average of roughly 35%. In essence, Jacksonville's structure revolves around a stable run base but limited vertical threat. Their 120 rushing yards per game and positive rushing efficiency show a solid foundation, but their passing output has regressed into negative territory despite respectable yardage averages, signaling an offense built more on controlled balance than explosive unpredictability. Trevor Lawrence's Week 10 performance against the Houston Texans represented a complete collapse in passing efficiency, driven by both structural breakdowns and defensive manipulation. He completed only 56.5% of his passes, well below the league average of roughly 64%, reflecting timing and synchronization issues under pressure. His completion percentage over expected CPOE stood at 3.9%, showing that accuracy fell below what the scheme should have produced. The expected points added per play, EPA per play, was 0.29, meaning every dropback cost the Jaguars nearly 1/3 of an expected point. Lawrence was sacked 5 times and pressured on 50% of his dropbacks, compared with the league average of around 37%, a clear sign of constant duress and poor protection response. His time to throw TTT averaged 2.94 seconds, slower than the league norm of about 2.6, indicating he held the ball too long and absorbed extra hits. With an average receiver separation of only 3.2 yards compared to the 3.5-yard league average, Jacksonville's wide receivers consistently failed to create space against Houston's man-match coverage. Altogether, Lawrence's total expected points, added EPA of 9.3, placed his outing in the bottom 5% of all single-game quarterback performances for the 2025 season. When isolating performance under pressure, the data showed that Houston did not need to blitz heavily to cause damage. In clean pockets, Lawrence managed plus 7, 3 EPA with 8.7 air yards per attempt AOI/A in a reasonable rhythm, though this sample was limited. Under pressure, however, his EPA plunged to 16.6 with only 5.9 air yards per attempt, exposing broken structure and sluggish footwork. Against the blitz, he posted 2.8 EPA and a 4.8-yard air average as simulated overloads and disguised safety pressures confused Jacksonville's protection calls. Even on 4-man rushes with no blitz, Lawrence's EPA was 6.4, proving that Houston's defensive wins came from coverage integrity rather than pure pressure volume. The time to throw analysis revealed a split personality within Jacksonville's passing design. On quick throws under 2.5 seconds, Lawrence posted plus 5. 4 EPA with 5.3 air yards per attempt and a 55.6% completion rate. These gains were primarily scheme-generated, screens, slants, and quick outs that succeeded on timing. But when he held the ball longer than 2.5 seconds, His production collapsed to 13.7 EPA and 9.3 air yards per attempt, suffering 5 sacks, and a pressure rate exceeding 50%. Houston's defensive front consistently collapsed the pocket once plays extended beyond that mark, while Jacksonville's route progressions past the second read failed to create any separation downfield. Depth of target analysis confirmed that intermediate zones were the only functional layer of the field. On short throws less than 10 air yards, Lawrence recorded 0.6 EPA, only 1.2 air yards per attempt, and a CPOE of 12%, signaling that even the quick game failed due to misfires and lack of yards after the catch. Intermediate throws between 10 and 19 yards produced plus 623 EPA and a plus 10.9% CPU, capitalizing on play-action seam routes that exploited Houston's rotating linebackers. Deep attempts of 20 yards or more were virtually absent, just one target, incomplete for 0.5 EPA and a staggering 31.8% CPOE, demonstrating that Jacksonville never generated vertical rhythm. Target-type splits further illustrated how the offense became constricted. Throws to slot receivers yielded plus 2. 0 EPA and 12.2 air yards per attempt, showing that interior leverage against the nickel cornerback provided the only consistent outlet. Tight ends added plus 3.5 EPA with plus 32 to 3% CPOE, largely on low-volume play-action leaks. In contrast, wide receivers on the perimeter were effectively erased, producing 0.3 EPA, 14.4 air yards per attempt, and just 1.0 yard of separation on average. Running backs added nothing, with 0.0 EPA and a 12.7% CPOE, as swing and flat routes were telegraphed and easily closed by linebackers. When the ball was funneled inside to the slot or tight end, the offense retained some efficiency, but anything to the outside, corner routes, hitches, or fades, failed completely, averaging under 1.5 yards of separation and negative EPA. Play action, normally one of Jacksonville's stabilizing mechanisms, offered no help. On play action dropbacks, the team managed 2.9 EPA, 5.4 air yards per attempt, and a CPOE of 3.6%, with a 50% blitz rate against them. Houston simply ignored the run fakes, triggering instead on the offensive line's protection direction. Without credible run-pass conflict, the play-action game lost its bite. In standard dropback situations, the Jaguars recorded 6.3 EPA, 8.5 air yards per attempt, and a CPOE of 4.0%, proving that the offense lacked spacing and tempo once forced into predictable, straight dropbacks. Synthesizing the data reveals a complete rhythm breakdown caused by interior chaos. The swing from plus 7, 3 EPA in clean pockets to 16.6 under pressure represents one of the largest single-game collapses of the 2025 season. Lawrence's accuracy dropped further under duress CPOE from 3.6 to 4.4, and his time to throw ballooned from 2.27 to 3.36 seconds. Intermediate routes provided the only positive output, highlighting a system dependent on play sequencing rather than adaptive matchups. Slot receivers and tight ends were functional lifelines, but wide receivers created virtually no leverage advantage, with average separation under 1.0 yard. The Composite Presre Efficiency Differential CPD, the gap between clean pocket and pressured EPA, was an enormous 23.9 points, quantifying how drastically Houston's pressure changed the game. Ultimately, Houston's defensive design forced Jacksonville into an isolation offense. By combining simulated pressures with man-match boundary coverage and flooding short zones using spot drop linebackers, the Texans destroyed Jacksonville's timing rhythm without needing heavy blitz volume. Lawrence's hesitation windows expanded beyond 2.9 seconds on average, collapsing pocket structure and neutralizing the Jaguars' usual timing-based passing attack. The Texans' formula was simple but devastating: use simulated pressure and boundary leverage to compress rhythm, squeeze the timing instead of the spacing, and force Jacksonville to operate in a dead zone between quick and intermediate throws, precisely where their expected points added was most negative. Trevor Lawrence's Week 10 performance against Houston was a clear illustration of structural breakdown under pressure and schematic containment. Across 23 dropbacks, he completed just 13 passes 56.5% for 158 yards with a 9.3 total expected points, added EPA, and a completion percentage over expected CPOE of 3.9%, metrics that collectively underscored inefficiency throughout all layers of the field. The Jaguars' offense, normally balanced and rhythmic, unraveled when forced into static dropback structures. Under pressure, Lawrence produced a disastrous 16.6 EPA with an average of only 5.9 yards per attempt and negative expected value on every throw type, indicating that Houston's pass rush didn't just hurry plays, it fully dictated them. Even when clean, his plus 7.3 EPA couldn't offset the total collapse once the pocket dissolved, creating one of the largest pressure to clean efficiency swings of the 2025 season. The Texans used disguised pressure looks and four-man simulated fronts to compress the pocket without overcommitting blitzers, registering a 50% QB pressure rate despite a moderate blitz frequency. Lawrence's average time to throw rose to 2.94 seconds, a full 0.3 above his seasonal norm, reflecting hesitancy and elongated reads in response to rotating coverage shells. Play action, traditionally his stabilizing mechanism, offered no relief, generating 2.9 EPA and yielding only 5.4 yards per attempt as Houston's linebackers ignored backfield fakes and keyed directly on protection flow. The short passing game, designed for rhythm and spacing, faltered with 0.6 EPA and just 1.2 air yards per attempt, while deep shots were virtually erased, totaling one incompletion for 0.5 EPA. The only semi-functional layer of the offense came from intermediate routes 10, 19 yards, which produced plus 6, 3 EPA, and a plus 10.9% CPOE, largely when Jacksonville managed to isolate seams or cross linebackers against zone rotations. Target distribution revealed where the structure held and where it fractured. Throws to slot receivers and tight ends produced positive efficiency plus 2.0 and plus 3.5 EPA respectively, benefiting from leverage and alignment mismatches. But perimeter targets, the traditional driver of explosive gains, completely failed to separate, averaging just 1.0 yard of separation and negative EPA. Running back checkdowns and backfield targets, often a safety net in Harbaugh-style pressure games, added no value 0.0 EPA, 12.7% CPOE, suggesting Lawrence had no reliable bailout outlet when Houston collapsed interior lanes. The Texans effectively forced Jacksonville into an isolation offense, stripping the rhythm out of their spacing concepts and reducing every drive to one-dimensional intermediate attempts or desperate extensions beyond 2.5 seconds. In totality, Jacksonville's Week 10 passing profile was characterized by isolation, hesitation, and inefficiency, a textbook example of defensive manipulation through simulated pressure and tight coverage discipline. Houston's defense didn't need volume to control the game, it needed sequencing. By alternating standard rushes with disguised looks and pairing man-match perimeter coverage with interior zone help, it dismantled Lawrence's sense of timing. The result was a negative EPA output across nearly every situational split, 50% pressure rate, and a passing offense that failed to sustain drive rhythm or generate explosive balance, evidence that Houston not only won physically, but conceptually. The Chargers' offensive plan against Jacksonville should emphasize tempo and spacing because the Jaguars generate plenty of early pressure without finishing plays and are noticeably stronger in man coverage than in zone coverage. The goal is to keep Justin Herbert's time to throw at or below 2.45 seconds, living in quick game concepts that repeatedly hit the same 0, 10-yard windows where Davis Mills excelled against their zones, curl/spacing and stick variations, dagger with the underneath sit, drive and Y cross, slant flat, and field hash hitches. On early downs, flood the right hash with 3-level sail, run seam benders and wrap and digs off play action, and release the running back into the hook window to isolate the linebackers Foye Olokun and Devin Lloyd, who can be exploited when forced to cover in space. To blunt Jacksonville's late down man calls, lean on fast motion, bunch/stack formations, and switch releases so receivers gain free access. On money downs, use mesh rail, pick/rub slant, pivot also called China, and bunch fade with an under route, plus a slot choice route for Ladd McConkey versus the nickel cornerback. Keep the deep shots selective, 2 or 3 total, tagged off under center play action to target Jerrion Jones and Greg Newsome to second with double moves like slant and go or out and up after you have established curls and outs. Protection should prioritize rhythm over heavy 7-man pockets because Jacksonville's pressure often fails to convert to sacks if the ball is out quickly. Slide help toward Josh Hines-Allen and chip him only on the designated shot plays. Set a sturdy vertical pocket against Trammell and Walker's late speed to power, and change Herbert's launch point a few times with half-roll keepers away from Walker. Arik Armstead is their most efficient finisher inside, so allocate center help and full-line slides on play action. When the Jaguars bring simulated or disguised pressure, replace the blitzer with a built-in hot. The running back or tight end settles at 5 to 6 yards into the vacated hook and have a boundary now screen tagged as a fast outlet. The run game should punish light boxes and the perimeter, where Jacksonville's fits crack, think pin pull, toss crack, outside zone, and orbit or jet motion as eye candy. Then pair these with glance and pop run pass options behind rotating safeties. Use split zone and duo as constraint plays once the linebackers start overrunning, and leverage 12 personnel with a nub tight end to force base defense before motioning to trips, which reveals coverage and creates favorable edges. Defensively, the Chargers should build the plan around edge integrity and interior disruption because Jacksonville's run game collapses between the tackles and only flashes on outside zone. Play nickel as your functional base, set firm edges, and spill the ball to rally defenders, using 5-man mint fronts when needed to choke wide zone while keeping cornerback force players clean. Rush with contained discipline and dent the interior pocket, mixing 4-man simulated pressures creepers to scramble protection rules without blitzing heavily. In coverage, play quarters match structures with a robber to cap seams and wall crossers at 10, 12 yards on early downs. Then on third down, rotate to cover 1 robber or 1 cross to erase the slot option game while using 2 read against 3-1 formations to trap outbreaking routes. Bracket the primary slot on critical downs, pass the tight end in and out of the robber's help. Trevor Lawrence leaned on tight end leaks and bring selective boundary corner blitz or nickel, green dog, pressure when the running back stays in protection. The aim is to force Lawrence beyond 2.5 seconds, where his efficiency plunges, and to eliminate his only consistently positive layer, the intermediate seams, with late rotation and seam caps. Open with a fast script that forces the Jaguars to declare coverage and defend the entire field, spacing with hash curls and a running back check release, 12 personnel with a nub tight end to outside zone weak and a boot to Y cross, thresh, 1 bunch mesh rail settle the mesh versus zone, pin pull toss with orbit motion, play action dagger with an alert slant, and go if the cornerback squats. Glance run pass option into a light box with the throw tagged if the safety spins down, sail flood to the right hash with the running back swinging opposite. Sprint out to the boundary with stick corner, a tight end middle screen or slow running back screen right after they heat up. And finally, a protected shot out and up to Josh Palmer while chipping Josh Hines-Allen. Success benchmarks should be clear. Keep time to throw at or below 2.45 seconds on at least 60% of dropbacks. Produce early down expected points. Added per pass of plus 0.10 or better, achieve at least a 45% success rate on perimeter runs. Generate a defensive pressure rate of 34% or higher with blitz usage at or below 20%. Hold Jacksonville's outside. Run success to 38% or lower, and drive Jacksonville's intermediate 10, 19 air yards target, expected points added to 0 or below. If Los Angeles maintains on schedule offense with perimeter runs and fast, zone flooding throws, then forces third and medium, where bunch/stack manipulates Jacksonville's man rules. The Chargers keep Herbert clean, cap volatility, and push the Jaguars into a chase script they have struggled to solve.